Bismillah, alhamdulillah, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wa ala thumma amma ba'd. To proceed, so today inshallah we will have Bab or Kitab al-Ijara, the book of leasing and hiring from Ibn Qudamah's book, Imam Ibn Qudamah's book, al-Umdat. Imam Ibn Qudamah died in the year 620 after Hijrah, and we've been studying his book al-Umdat with the commentary for how long now? For 2 years or something? But anyway, we're now in the Fiqh of Financial Transactions. We have 3 more chapters will be done, inshallah. So hopefully before Ramadan we'll be done with the Fiqh of Financial Transactions, and thereafter, when we come back, inshallah, from our Ramadan break, we will start the Fiqh of Inheritance. Today we are talking about Kitab al-Ijara, the book of leasing and hiring. And you have to say leasing and hiring, because Ijara is not only about one of, it's about both. When you rent a property, that is Ijara. And when you hire someone to do a job for you, or hire someone as your employee, that is also Ijara. That is a form of Ijara. So leasing is when the usufruct is utility, and hiring is when the usufruct is a service provided by someone. Anyway, the Shaykh rahimahullah ta'ala said, وَهِيَ عَقْدٌ عَلَى الْمَنَافِعِ لَازِمٌ مِنَ الطَّرَفَيْنِ. And we will talk about the definition and the bindingness of the contract, and we'll talk about the conditions, we'll talk about the rights and obligations of the lessee and lessor. Lessee and lessor. Lessee, the lessor is the landlord, and the lessee is the tenant. I mean, the lessee is not only the landlord and tenant, it's the person who basically purchases the service or the utility is the lessee, and the lessor is the person who sells the service or the utility. Okay, so the utility, I should say. Then the Shaykh said, وهو هي عقد على المنافع لازم من الطرفين لا يملك أحدهما فسخها ولا تنفسخ بموته ولا جنونه. Ijara is a contract whose object is a benefit, service, or utility. It is mutually binding on both parties. Neither of them holds the right to unilaterally annul it. Okay, it's a binding contract between two. It involves a usufruct, service, or utility. Ijara is permissible by the Quran, the Sunnah, and the agreement of Muslim scholars. قالت إحداهما يا أبت استأجره إن خير من استأجرت القوي الأمين. One of them said, "Oh my father, hire him. The best person you could hire is al-qawi, the competent." Qawi means the powerful. It means in the context of hiring the competent, because power is not only limited to muscular power, it's competency, whatever that you are demanded to do. Qawi al-amin, trustworthy. So if you're looking to hire anyone, look for 2 things. And actually, if you're looking for anyone to do anything good, look for 2 things. They need to be competent, and they need to be honest. They need to be good, but they also at the same time they need to be competent. If you're looking to marry, you need to marry someone who could deliver, discharge their obligations towards the marriage. And you also need to marry someone who's honest and kind and nice and so on. If you want to have a neighbor, you want to have someone who's competent in your life in general. Just try to surround yourself with people who are competent and good. Competent, not good, could be disastrous. They could just sort of exploit you to no end. Good and not competent, they could be a huge burden also. They could also be disastrous. So competent and good. Then also, there are many hadiths that we could invoke here to prove the legitimacy of ijara, but it's a matter of unanimity. So the Prophet ﷺ, for instance, said, أَعْطُوا الْأَجِيرَ أَجْرَهُ قَبْلَ أَنْ يَجِفَّ عَرَقُهُ. This was reported by Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhu. It's reported by Ibn Majah from Abdullah ibn Umar. أَعْطُوا الْأَجِيرَ أَجْرَهُ قَبْلَ أَنْ يَجِفَّ عَرَقَهُ. Give your employee, your worker, his compensation before his sweat dries out. Before his sweat dries out. Don't procrastinate. Give him his compensation before his sweat dries out. And certainly reason also says that ijara is legitimate, permissible. It's got to be legitimate and permissible. And we as Muslims have this concept of tahsin and taqbih aqli. We have a moderate position concerning tahsin and taqbih aqli, the mind's ability to discern between good and bad. It has the ability, but it is limited. It's dependent on the divine guidance for refinement and adjustment, and to also be able to overcome our inequities and our biases. But we do have that ability. So that is why the scholars always invoke that ta'leel in addition to tadleel. Ta'leel is the justification, rational justification of the rulings. Tadleel is to find the daleel, proof from the Quran and Sunnah. But ta'leel is to provide rational justification, because the mind is capable to figure out what is right with caveats and contingencies that I mentioned. So they say that ijara is necessary. It's needed, it's required, because like human beings have needs for properties and services that they do not own. So they need to hire someone for those services, and they need to rent properties that they cannot purchase. Not everything you need to use, you can purchase. Nowadays, people basically purchase everything, right? Almost everything. But sometimes you need to rent things. You need to use the usufruct of a property without acquiring the property itself. And that is why ijara is important. In that sense, he says it's aqdun ala al-manafa. Ijara is a contract whose object is a benefit, service, or utility. Usufruct is service or utility. It's not aqd ala a'yan. It is the object of the contract is not a property. It is the utility of that property. It's the benefit that you could acquire from that property. One of the differences between ijara and sale, although many things apply, ijara you are purchasing also. It's a type of sale. It's a type of sale because you're purchasing the utility, the usufruct, the benefit, the service of this property for a period of time. For a period of time. But one of the differences is that you could sell me 1 pound of sugar, right? Although I'm very against sugar, but I'm not buying any sugar from you, but let's say something else. No, I have a personal vendetta against sugar. No, what? Dates, or let's say dates. So, I don't eat dates. But on a serious note, you could sell me 1 pound of dates, but you cannot rent them to me, rent me the dates. Why? Because it is a property that cannot be utilized without itself vanishing. The only way you could utilize this property is to eat it. And then that would not be renting, that would not be leasing. So one of the conditions, one of the difference between sale and ijara, and one of the conditions of ijara is that the property has to have a benefit that the lessee will use, will acquire without the property itself vanishing. So anything like a car, like a house, like something of that nature. They say sometimes you could rent money with the condition that this will be used as a weight, or this will be used as a hilya for beautification, because money used to be made of gold and silver. But you cannot rent money unless you stipulate that this will be the use. So I'll rent 5 dinars from you and bring them back next month, 5 dinars. But in this case, they are to be used with a rent. Could be cumbersome, could be problematic, but it has to be, it cannot be for other than these benefits that you could acquire without the 5 dinars being spent. You cannot spend them. If you spend the 5 dinars, then that is riba. You can't rent money. But if those 5 dinars, you will take them and put them in a necklace because you have like a wedding, and it's just people, it's gold. So if you rent 200 dinars, put them in a necklace, wear them in your wedding, you could rent the 200 dinars in this case. Anyway, this is just like a side issue, side point. But it is aqd ala al-manafa', it's a contract whose object is a benefit, service, or utility. It is mutually binding, عقد لازم من الطرفين لا يملك أحدهما فسخه ولا تنفسخ بموته ولا جنونه. It is mutually binding from both. When we say عقد لازم, what is the opposite of عقد لازم? The counterpart. Yeah, it's optional, but I'm talking about the Arabic word for it. جائز. Yes. عقد جائز. So لازم and جائز. لازم is a binding contract. Jaiz is a non-binding contract. Binding contract means no party of the contract may annul it, void it unilaterally. Certainly, if both agree, that's it. They agree to annul the contract, to void the contract. If both agree, but no one can void it unilaterally. Aqd jaiz is the opposite of this. One or either party of the contract may void it unilaterally, such as wakala. I hire you as my wakil, your attorney. I can come at any time and end this wakala agency, terminate it, or you could say, I don't want to be your wakil anymore. I don't want to be your agent anymore. And at any time, terminate it. So they would provide some conditions here so that aqd jaiz does not result in harm, because the overriding rule in fiqh is la darar wa la dirar. One of the legal maxims, la darar wa la dirar. There should be no harm or reciprocation of harm. So al-aqd al-jaiz, if we say that there is a particular aqd that will result in significant, identifiable harm, if someone just unilaterally all of a sudden terminated it, then the fiqh will provide accommodations for them to avoid that, consequence, to avoid harm as a consequence. But in general, aqd al-ijara is aqd lazim, it is binding, you cannot pull out. Once you sign, you cannot pull out. You will have to, unless the person, the other party violated the agreement, you have to respect this agreement, regardless whether you have, unless Unless, like, someone, for instance, pays a wet nurse to breastfeed and the child dies, then in this case they will allow you to void the agreement. But if you rent a property and you don't have use for it anymore, you can't pull out of that contract. You cannot pull out of that contract. You either sort of, even if you died, you can't pull out of that contract. Your heirs cannot pull out of that contract because subleasing is permissible in Islam. So someone can acquire that utility of that product during the time that was designated. So someone will do it. So, or if you rent out a property and you die, your heirs cannot pull out of that contract. So it is a binding contract. Death of one of the two parties. In the Jaiz contract, when you have a wakil, your death terminates it. His death terminates it. When it is a binding contract, neither your death nor their death or the other party's death will terminate the contract. Even insanity does not terminate the contract. But is there any exception to this?
Why the wet nurse then terminate the contract if the child dies?
Because the child was the object of the sort of the mahalla, the substrate for the benefit, and that mahal itself just vanished. So, and then certainly we will say that also when the property itself is not usable anymore, the contract will be terminated. But as long as the property can be used, your death, your insanity, but are there other exceptions? Because we said that this is not about leasing only, it's also about hiring. So if I hire you to perform a certain job for me, and I don't want to say this, if you hire someone to perform a certain job for you, and that person becomes insane, loses their mind, he said, not even that. The contract is still a valid contract.
But he's not doing the job.
Okay. In this case, his guardian, or if he died, his heirs, inheritors, will replace him with someone else to do the job.
They said we didn't really contract for that. It's not us, it's him.
But what was the contract about? The performance of a certain job. We will find you someone else to perform the same job. I know what you want to say. They said it. The fuqaha did not really miss out on anything. They said it. They said unless this person was hired for particular expertise that he only provides, you can't replace him. This person was hired for themselves, for their expertise. Or it is specified that their own service, it's not the job. The agreement is not on the job. The agreement is on this person, the particularity, the person himself is intended in the hiring. So I am not hiring just like any sort of IT programmer. I am hiring X. So in this case, their death or insanity will terminate the contract. But if the agreement was about providing a certain service, then the custodians or the inheritors of that person who became insane or who died will provide the service, will replace him, provide the service, and the contract will stand. For instance, you hire a company to build you like a sort of an apartment building. And then in the middle of this, the person dies. The inheritors will tell you, we will finish it for you. We will do the work. We'll just, we will do the work. We will replace whoever needs to be replaced, we'll do the work, the contract is still binding. So what we wanted to learn from this is that the ijara contract is a very strong binding contract. Then the Sheikh said, okay, so he will give you some exceptions now. I'll give you the exception is when you hire someone for particular expertise or for the particular person, not the generic job that anyone could perform. In this case, the contract will be terminated by their insanity or death or their departure or something, imprisonment, etc., etc. Then the Sheikh said, وَتَنْفَسِخُ بِتَلَفِ الْعَيْنِ الْمَعْقُودَ عَلَيْهَا وَانْقِطَاعِ نَفْعِهَا وَلِلْمُسْتَأْجِرِ فَسْخُهَا بِالْعَيْبِ قَدِيمًا كَانَ أَوْ حَدِيثًا. The contract is not annulled by the death or insanity of either party. However, it is annulled when the property or object of the contract is damaged or becomes of no avail. The lessee has the right to annul the contract for a defect, be it old or newly occurring, originating. So, whenever you rent like a property, and then it's just not usable anymore. You can't use it because something happened, whether it is something that was old and we discovered or something that happened during your renting period. You still keep in mind that even if you caused this, you will be liable, even as a tenant. If you caused the problem, you will be liable, but the contract will not be voided. Wait a second, sorry. The contract will be voided. You have the ability to void the contract because the service cannot be delivered anymore, the utility cannot be delivered anymore, but you will be liable because you caused it. You'll be liable because you caused it. So the bottom line is, when the service or the utility is not deliverable anymore, that is grounds for annulling the contract of ijara, leasing, or hiring. That is grounds for annulling the contract of ijara, whether it is leasing or hiring. Whether this problem was old and the landlord did not tell you about it, or it occurred during your usage of the property. Then the Sheikh said, وَلَا تَصِحُّ إِلَّا عَلَى نَفْعٍ مَعْلُومٍ إِمَّا بِالْعُرْفِ كَسُكْنَى دَارٍ وَإِمَّا بِالْوَصْفِ كَخِياطَةِ ثَوْبٍ مُعَيَّنٍ وَبِنَاءِ حَائِطٍ وَحَمْلِ شَيْءٍ إِلَى مَوْضِعٍ مُعَيَّنٍ وَضَبْطُ ذَلِكَ بصفاته أو وضبط ذلك بصفاته ومعرفة أجره وإن وقعت على عين فلا بد من معرفتها. Okay, so the Sheikh said, leasing or hiring is only valid when the benefit, whether it's service or utility, is determinately known. The benefit, you remember when we first spoke about financial transactions and we said transparency is one of the cornerstones of legitimate Islamic transactions, mu'amalat. Transparency is determinately known. The benefit, you will have to know it. This may be either by custom, as in renting a house for dwelling, or by description, such as in hiring someone to sew a certain garment, build a wall, or hold something to a particular place. It is only valid when the benefit is accurately described and the compensation is known. If the subject matter of the contract is a physical property, it must be determinately known. And I mean determinately known, it's not like one of many. This particular item. You're renting this particular item. Okay. So we're saying here that how is it known? Transparency here means, so transparency here would mean that we have to agree, like if I go rent a hotel room, do I need to tell them how I will use it? You know, I'm going to sleep on the bed, sometimes I'll sit in the chair, I may turn the AC on, you know, if I really had to use the bathroom, I will. And do you have to do that? No. Okay. So whenever it is customarily known, you don't need to provide a description of the benefit or the service. Customarily known. Whenever it is not customarily known, the description has to be detailed to the end. To which end? Why are we being so fussy about these things? Because fiqh is about preventing disputation between the people. You know, trying to mitigate that an undesirable outcome. So transparency prevents disputation. If it is not customarily known, make sure and try to do this, please, because most of the troubles and most, you know, I think that every Muslim company or like they need a pocket mufti. Because and a pocket mufti for the family also, because so one of the things that can help us avoid, you know, conflict is transparency, clarity. Spell it out. No fine print. All just sort of good font, 12, good type of font, size 12, size 14, maybe even more helpful. So that's the concept here. But not only the benefit, but also the compensation. Because we do not want to come back and say ajr al-mithl, fair market value, because then we will need to find experts and we will disagree over the fair market value. Because eventually, when a contract becomes voided, then ajr al-mithl is what will be, whenever a contract becomes voided, then we'll go back and look for fair market value to compensate the people, because whatever they agreed on is void now. Their contract is void. Also, when you do not determine the compensation, like do you remember in Ja'ala, we said that if you go and, when we talked about Ja'ala, per job wages, and remind me to say what's the difference between Ja'ala and Ijara, per job wages. When we talked about Ja'ala, we said that if you go to someone and give them, like you go to a tailor and give them something, or like a Hammal, what's Hammal? Delivery man, or the person who carries stuff. Transport. They didn't have them here? No, they must have had them at one point. Hammal, so you go like someone carries stuff for you, huh? Courier, but anyway, no courier, the delivery person. So if you have your luggage, and someone you come down from the wherever, or you come off the train, and then you have your luggage, and someone takes your luggage, they are hammal. That's what they do all the day long, and you give them your luggage, walk next to them to your car, and then tell them we didn't agree on anything. Thank you. Goodbye. So we said that this is that you are going to, you will have to give them their fair market compensation. Ajr al-mithl. Would it be better that you agree with them? It would be. Sometimes it becomes so difficult, and that's why in fiqh that flexibility was shown, that sometimes it becomes so difficult. Therefore, fiqh has said, whenever this is done, ajr al-mithl will be binding, fair market value. Ajr al-mithl means equivalent wage. Ajr, wage, mithl, the equivalent. So equivalent wage, or the wage of the equivalent service. fair market value of that service. But certainly, whenever you could be more transparent and more detailed, be more transparent and be more detailed, because that will be conducive to sort of good partnership and good transactions in general. Then the Sheikh said, وَإِنْ وَقَعَتْ عَلَى عَيْنٍ فَلَا بُدَّ مِنْ مَعْرِفَتِهَا, and if the subject matter of the contract is a physical property, it must be determinately known. There is a hadith here where the Prophet ﷺ was reported to have said, questionable traceability to the Prophet ﷺ was reported to have said, إِذَا اسْتَأْجَرَ أَحَدُكُمْ أَجِيرًا فَلْيُعْلِمْهُ أَجْرًا. Whenever one of you hires a person, a worker, let him know his compensation. Let him know his compensation. Although the traceability is questionable to the Prophet ﷺ, there is unanimity on accepting the meaning of this. Unanimously, it is accepted. Let him know his compensation. Then the Sheikh said, وَمَنْ اسْتَأْجَرَ شَيْئًا فَلَهُ أَنْ يُقِيمَ مَقَامَهُ مَنْ يَسْتَوْفِيهِ بِإِجَارَةٍ أَوْ غَيْرِهَا إِذَا كَانَ مِثْلَهُ أَوْ دُونَهُ. Now we will talk about, so we talked about the definition of ijara, and when we talked about the definition of ijara, we differentiated between ijara and sale. It has to be a property that you could use without the property itself vanishing, but we did not distinguish between ijara and ja'ala. And it may be warranted to distinguish. Per job wages, if you remember the lecture, the class that we had on per job wages, the differences between ijara and ja'ala is that ja'ala is not binding, it is jaiz. So you will say, I lost my iPhone. Whoever finds it, I'll give him $10, $50. Then 2 minutes later, you will say, forget about it. I'm not giving anyone anything. If you find it and bring it back to me, I will say, Jazakumullah khairan, make dua for you. And do I have the right? Yes. When is my right when is it terminated? When someone actually brings it to you. You can't say, no, I take it back. When they bring it to you. But prior to this, you have to say, you can say, I'm going to take it back. But not when you hire someone. That's the difference between ja'ala and ijara. Ja'ala is a sort of a prize for doing a certain job. Prize for doing a certain job. It's a jaiz contract. It's not a lazim contract. It's not a binding contract. Also, in ja'ala, you do not need to even specify the person. You do not need to specify the person. You are saying whoever does it will take this much money. And in ja'ala, the amount or the duration of work is not even known. Because, whoever does this for me, whoever builds the wall for me, or, a fence for me, then they will get this. It becomes very close to ijara here also, but bear with me. So whoever builds that wall or finds the iPhone or something of that nature, they will get this. How much work does this need? In ijara, we have to specify one of two things. One of two things. We cannot specify them both together at the same time, by the way, in ijara. It's either the time or the work. I want you to make me a garment out of this fabric. But you can't say, and that could be somewhat problematic. It has to take 2 days, but you could agree on a time, and then they should live up to their promise. But this is a type of ijara, when what we defined is the job itself, the work that needs to be done. There is another type of ijara where you say, I want to hire you from 8 to 5 every day for the next year. Monday, you take the weekend off, and so, whatever. So what we're agreeing on, you're now ajir khas. Ajir khas means that this time is devoted to me. I can even prevent you from going to the masjid because this time is devoted to me. I cannot prevent you from making your salah if the time will go out. I can't prevent you from making your salah, but I can prevent you from going to the masjid. And I can prevent you from a lot of things. You cannot be doing anything while you're doing my work. The rights of the employer, huge rights for the employer, by the way. So when it comes to ethical standards that the Muslim employee should hold on to or should live up to, huge, big, greater than whatever standards anyone has. So I can prevent you from a lot of things. And you cannot basically even read the Quran while at work if this distracts you from the job. If you memorize the Quran and you sort of chant it to yourself, without causing distraction, I can't prevent you from that. If it does not affect your performance, if it does not affect your job. If it affects your job, then you are ethically bound before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to not do it if it causes you distraction. If your job, for instance, as a scribe is to write, and you keep on sort of reviewing mahfuzatak of the Quran, you keep reviewing, and that causes you distraction, you should not be doing this. But if it's neutral or helpful, such as if you're a carpenter, for instance, or something that does not require that much sort of focus, attention mentally, and you're doing some job, and this helps you, motivates you could do it. Anyway, so the difference here between ijara and ja'ala is that in ja'ala, it's not binding, and it's not specific, the amount of work, so whoever does it gets this much, and the person, the worker, is not specified. And that is why you find the Hanbalis, for instance, they say that you cannot hire someone to make adhan or iqamah or to lead the prayers or to do something of this nature as an ajir, but you could make it a ja'ala. You could make it a ja'ala. In what sense? You will say, we need someone to do this, no one is doing it, so whoever makes the adhan in our masjid, we will give them this, every month. Surprise. It's not an ujra, because there is no ujra fil qurubat. This is something that should be for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There should be no ujra, but it is a prize. And since it is a prize, what is the difference here between being a prize and being ujra? This is not binding. And this is whoever can do it for us, we will give him this. But if we chose someone, then certainly people will just leave him alone. But then it is not binding. Then there could not be contention and fighting. What if we found someone who will do it for free? But certainly you have to be reasonable. You really have to be reasonable. But the point here is that they're trying to say that this is deserved as a prize, not as an ujra. It's a prize for someone who will fulfill that need for the community. Fulfill that need for the community. So that's the difference between ijara and ja'ala. Then the Shaykh said, so we talked about the definition, and part of the definition is that we distinguish between ijara and sale, and we said that ijara in a sense is a purchase, but the difference between it and a sale is that the property itself can, you could you could procure a benefit, usufruct, from the property without using the property itself. or without the property itself vanishing. And then we talked about the bindingness, and we said this is a binding contract. Nothing would end it except if subject matter, if the contract is not there anymore. The very baby that was going to breastfeed is not there. The house that we rented is not livable. Or it has like a problem that makes it difficult to live in, etc. The car is not moving. Something of that nature that will prevent you from procuring that benefit or that service or that utility. You die, someone else can do it in your place. The contract is binding. Unless the hiring was for the specific person, then in this case, the contract will be voided. So a very binding contract. Then the Sheikh will talk here about some of the conditions here and some of the rights and obligations. And we talked about the conditions. And we said that the conditions, mainly the issue of transparency, mainly that the benefits got to be known, identified, determinately known, this particular thing, or mawsoof, or accurately described, And then the compensation has to be also known, and we said if the compensation was not known because it's something that people do all the time, like carry stuff for people, and they don't always make a contract, then the compensation would be called ajr al-mithl, equivalent wage, or compensation, fair market value. Finally, rights and obligations of this contract, and the Sheikh said, وَمَنِ اسْتَأْجَرَ شَيْئًا فَلَهُ أَنْ يُقِيمَ مَقَامَهُ مَنْ يَسْتَوْفِيهِ بِإِجَارَةٍ أَوْ غَيْرِهَا إِذَا كَانَ مِثْلَهُ أَوْ دُونَهُ. Whoever rents something may substitute another person in his or her place to produce or to procure the benefit, which is service or utility, for the same rent or a different one. That is only if he or she is like him or less. What does it mean, like him or less? So he will explain it. If you rent a piece of land to cultivate barley, you cannot cultivate wheat. If you're rented to cultivate wheat, you can cultivate barley. Wheat or barley. Why is it? Because the farmers will tell you it's more depleting of the resources of the land to cultivate wheat. So if you rent it and we agree, you could rent it and say, I'll cultivate whatever I want. And then you could cultivate whatever you want. But if you rent it and you specify in the agreement, I'll rent it to cultivate barley, you cannot cultivate wheat. Okay? If you rent a mule to ride, and let's say you're about 150 pounds, can you have someone else ride the mule, as long as they're not heavier than 150 pounds? Because you own, what he wants to say is, why is subleasing, that's the modern term for this, why is subleasing permissible in Islam? Because you actually purchased the use service. It is yours. لك حق التصرف. You can dispose of that. You own that service. You own that benefit. Usufruct utility. You own it. So whether you procure it yourself or someone else, it is fine. It is fine. As long as the rate of utilization is the same or less. It's called rate of utilization. If you're 150 pounds and you rent this mule and tell me I will go to Mecca and come back, and then I discover that someone else could be your whatever, anybody, and they look a lot heavier, I can ask for the difference. And in fact, when you read it, they had figured this stuff out. They figured this stuff out. So let's say you rented a mule from me for 10 dinars. Take it to Mecca and come back. Actually, the fair market value was 9 dinars for your weight. You're 150 pounds. And let's say you're 250 pounds. Fair market value is 12 dinars. You give it to someone who's 250 pounds. Fair market value is 12 dinars for taking that mule, going to Mecca and coming back. And we agreed on 10. Because as the owner, I saw that you're quite petite, so I gave it to you for 10. When the market value was actually 9. So now, how much should I pay you? I discovered that you give it to someone who's much heavier. How much do I owe you? 3. 3. Okay. You give me, we agreed on 10. Fair market value is 9. And fair market value for the 250 pound is 12. So it is 12 minus 9, not 12 minus 10. That is how you determine the difference. And you take that difference, which is 3, and you add it to what we agreed on, not the fair market value. Because let us say, I give it to you for more than fair market value because it was the season, it was for some reason. My mule is special. I sort of, whatever. But that's how they calculate it. Anyway. The Sheikh said, وَمَنْ اسْتَأْجَرَ أَرْضًا لِزَرْعٍ فَلَهُ زَرْعُ مَا هُوَ أَقَلُّ مِنْهُ ضَرَرًا فَإِنْ زَرْعَ مَا هُوَ أَكْبَرُ ضَرَرًا مِنْهُ أَوْ يُخَالِفُ ضَرَرُهُ ضَرَرَهُ فَعَلَيْهِ أَجْرُ الْمِثْلِ. If someone leases land for growing a certain crop, he or she may also grow any crop that is less harmful to the land. However, if the person grows something that brings about more harm or a different type of harm, then he or she has to pay the fair rent, أجرة المثل, equivalent wage. Okay. Then the Sheikh said, وَإِنْ اكْتَرَ إِلَى مَوْضِعٍ مُعَيَّنٍ, and I will, because we started 5 minutes late, so I'm just going to ask you for 5 more minutes, beyond the time. وإن اقترأ إلى موضع معين فجاوزه أو لحمل شيء فزاد عليه فعليه أجر المثل للزائد وضمان العين إن تلفت وإن تلفت العين من غير تعد فلا ضمان عليه. The same applies to the one who rents a beast of mount or an individual to carry something to a certain place. If the renter goes beyond that place or exceeds the carrying load, he or she has to pay the fair or equivalent wage for the excess, and also bears liability daman for the loss of the commodity if it perishes. If the property is damaged without transgression, then there is no liability. He wants to say, in addition to what we said before, that he will owe the difference for the rate of utilization. If the subleasing was to someone or some entity that caused greater rate of utilization of the land, of the mule, or whatever, you'll pay the difference. In addition to paying the difference, we did not agree that you will, I gave you this mule. I thought my mule can handle you. Well, this mule, you brought the mule back to me with like a broken back. Well, you're damin. We didn't agree on this. You're liable. Let us say my mule caught a virus. You had the mule, my mule caught a virus. and died or became sick. You brought it back to me. Who's liable? Lessor, lessee? Lessor, the owner. Because when you are renting a property, you're not responsible unless you do one of two things, ta'addi or tafreed. Ta'addi is an act of aggression. You do something wrong that you were not supposed to do. Tafreed is an act of negligence. You don't do something you were supposed to do. You don't do something you were supposed to do. So if you farrat, if you did not give the mule food or water for 2 days and the mule became sick and died, that is tafreed, that's negligence. If you ta'addayt, if you beat the mule so hard that you hurt the mule, that is called what? Transgression. So if there is no transgression and there is no negligence and something happened to the rented property, who's liable? Always the owner. Always the owner. Because the only thing I purchased from you that I should be liable for is the utility, not the property. You're still. And if you rent it out to me, you're trusting me. You're trusting me enough to give me your property to use. And I only purchased the utility. So if like something happens at home, you know, we have leaking water in the ceiling. You rent an apartment, the ceiling is leaking. Who's responsible? The owner. When will you be responsible? If you caused this by ta'addi or tafreed, by doing something wrong or by not doing something right, something you were expected to do, you're required to do. Then the Sheikh said, وَلَا ضَمَانَ عَلَى الْأَجِيرِ الَّذِي يُؤَجِّرُ نَفْسَهُ مُدَّةً بِعَيْنِهَا فِيمَا يَتْلَفُ فِي يَدِهِ مِنْ غَيْرِ تَفْرِيطٍ. A worker hired for a certain period bears no liability for damaging anything as long as there is no negligence, tafreed, on the part of the worker. That is al-ajir al-khas. That is the employee that is hired for a certain time. You hire a maid at home. And she does something, she breaks something, she does something, you know, or he, who's responsible? She or he would be only responsible if they committed ta'addi or tafreed, did something wrong or did not do something required. But otherwise, you are responsible. Your employee is your responsibility. Whatever happens during the employment, the employer is responsible for all damages and all liabilities caused by the employee, and the employee is not responsible, except when he commits ta'addi or tafreed. Then the Sheikh said, then there is no also ضمان ولا على حجام أو ختان أو طبيب إذا عرف منهم حذق الصنعة ولم تجن أيديهم ولا على الراعي إذا لم يتعد. Similarly, there is no liability on a cupper or a circumciser or a physician if the person is known for his or her skill and did not commit wrongdoing, jinayah. A shepherd also would not be liable if he or she did not transgress. So the bottom line is no one is liable until. But when it comes to people who have special skills, like the physician, the circumciser, etc., the hajjam, when it comes to people who have special skills, there is a little bit of a wrinkle here. You may have not committed ta'addi or tafreed, but you got into the wrong business. You're not really qualified. And the beauty of Islam is that even something of this nature, before there was standardization of these professions or anything, the Prophet ﷺ said, "Man tatabbaba wa lam yu'lam minhu tibbun fahuwa dhamin." Man tatabbaba wa lam yu'lam minhu tibbun fahuwa dhamin. This was reported by Abu Dawood from Amr ibn Shu'ayb an Abihi an Jadd. Whoever practices medicine without being known for such sort of profession, وَلَمْ يُعْلَمْ مِنْهُ طِبٌ. So practicing medicine without being qualified, فَهُوَ ضَامِن. He's liable, or she is liable. Liable for what? The damage that you'll cause. Because you just got into the wrong thing. You know, you are not qualified. And that hadith is also to encourage us to standardize the practice of medicine, which happened during the Khilafah al-Abbasiyya, where they actually had licenses for physicians. Then the Sheikh said, unlike the Ajir al-Khas, your employee, if you hire someone, if you sort of commission someone to do something for you, unlike the Ajir al-Khas, your own employee, they will be liable. Because Ali said, لا يصلح الناس إلا ذلك. Nothing would work except that. And he made them liable. Which ones? The tailor, you know, you give the shoemaker, those people. He said, وَيَضْمَنُ الْقَصَّارُ وَالْخَيَّاطُ وَنَحْوُهُمَا مِمَّنْ يَتَقَبَّلُ الْعَمَلَ مَا تَلِفَ بِعَمَلِهِ دُونَ مَا تَلِفَ مِنْ حِرْزِهِ. However, a fuller, a tailor, and others like them who work for piece wages would be liable for the damage they cause by their own doing, but not for what is damaged while in their custody. Okay, so not for damage that happens while the property in their custody. I give you leather to make me a pair of shoes. I come back and you say, we had a flood here, and I'm sorry it's ruined, your leather is ruined. Or we had a fire, and your fabric is burned. You're a tailor. So who's liable? Okay, then we will ask, did he commit any tafrit? Was he negligent? Did he not take the proper precautions? He did not commit any tafrit. It was just like completely out of their control. You're liable, you're lost. Hanbali wise. But there is a disagreement over this also, because some scholars made them liable since there has to be, since they said that the market, and it is not clear whether Ali made them liable for everything or made them liable for what they do. But when it is caused by them, they cannot tell you what is different here is that they cannot tell you I did not commit any ta'addi or tafrit. When it is wrong, when it doesn't fit you right, when something happens, when they are doing it and then just their hand slipped, no ta'addi, no tafrit, no transgression, no negligence. It just so happened out of their control, but it was their own doing, not like a natural calamity. They are responsible. And Ali held the manufacturers and those craftsmen liable because he figured that the market can never thrive without trust. And if I don't trust that I can bring my stuff for you to make me a garment, and I come back and then you tell me lost this and that, then trust will be lost in the market. And that is a form of istihsan practiced by the Sahaba Ridwanullahi alayhim. That is counter to the qiyas. Because the qiyas, which is technically, those people should not be liable. Because you came to them, you trusted them, you left your stuff with them out of trust. So qiyas-wise, they should not be liable, which is the sort of the technical analogy. But because the objectives, the higher objectives, are more important to preserve than the technicality, the scholars would make them liable. And Ali radiallahu anhu was the first to make them liable for the benefit of the people and for the benefit of the markets as well. That will bring us to the end of this chapter. بكتاب الإجارة. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.